What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of DIY Money.
DIY Money.
Logan, it's been a while.
It's been a while since you and I have been on together. It's fun. You know what? Shaking, not much. I think we got to get right into it today because we've been on this series. We've been going on it strong, our Money Pit series that we've been doing. And we really started doing this, Allie, because there's a lot of data out there that's not pretty. And the markets haven't been pretty. They've been very volatile. But people are starting to realize that they have to get their financial house in order. And we're seeing the data, all-time highs in credit cards, all-time highs in auto loans. The one that really stuck out to us was the 90-day delinquency rate on auto loans was higher than it has ever been. Higher than the Great Financial Crisis, higher than, even 2001. So it is astronomical, the amount of debt that we're seeing out there. And we really wanted to get this series going so that we could lay out to people the steps they need to be taking and making sure that they're on the right path. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, and keep your questions coming in the meantime.
Yeah,
Podcast
for sure.
at DIYmoney.org. You can send those in a minute or less. And once we start doing questions again in a few more episodes, we'll send you a $25 Amazon gift card for sending those. So today is the last Money Pit. We're going to be talking about the thing that we see oftentimes in clients when they come in and they're like, okay, I'm ready to get started, but they're in their 40s or 50s and they feel super behind. So we're talking about kicking the can down the road. Just this idea that I'll save when I make more income, or I'll save when the kids are in college, I'll save when fill in the blank. And this idea that, yes, there might come times in the future where you might have more income. For the most part, the time to start saving is actually now. So I'll let you kick it off, and then I'll kind of fill in.
Yeah, what you said is perfect. The time is now. So starting now, getting on the path towards your successful financial life starts now. And what we talk about all the time on this show is you have to follow those steps, right? We've talked about this over these last few Money Pit episodes. You need to make sure that you have a budget in place. You need to make sure that you are saving for an emergency fund or have an emergency fund established. You need to have that fast cash there. You need to start building margin. So building margin through either cutting your expenses or increasing the amount of income that you're bringing in the door. That is crucial to get on the right path. Once you're there, don't stop. I see it often. People have done the first initial steps, but then they get to the point where they're just basically have the amount of money that they have the margin, but they're like, yeah, well, I'm going to use my margin to spend a little bit extra. And then you fall back into what we talked about a couple episodes ago of living paycheck to paycheck. Even though you're not, because you've built up a little bit of an emergency fund and you have some different things going, you never really pursue or go down the road of, I'm going to start intently saving. Or maybe you're someone that's sitting there and saying, I am in a bad financial situation. I am significantly in debt. I do have these other things, but it's just too hard right now to get on the path. We've talked about it multiple times throughout this series. You have to be a little bit radical. You have to be a little bit crazy in the degree that you pursue this, saying no to things, not keeping up with the Joneses, going down this path where people might say you're crazy when you're doing it, but how important it is to start now. And I don't care if you're in your 20s, if you're in your teens, if you're in your 40s or 60s, the time to start is now and start putting money aside for retirement. We talk all the time, and this is a principle that I think we need to make sure everybody is doing out there. If you're not getting a 401k match from your employer, you definitely need to be doing that. But after that, once you've established some of these basic things of having your fast cash emergency fund, getting margin, starting to pay off debt, you should really be putting 10% aside for retirement, for that long-term goal, a 10% at a minimum. And that's not including the match. So hopefully you're putting 10% in yourself and you're getting a match on top of that is then helping you save for retirement. But we've found if you can start early saving that 10% for retirement, normally you're setting yourself up pretty good for a long-term longevity of this kind of path.
Yeah, I think you nailed this and you started talking about it, but one of the things that I have found to be really helpful for people who might feel like, well, I just started my career, I'm making pennies, and so how am I supposed to start down this path to wealth? And you talked about 10%. So you'll notice what we don't talk about is an X amount of dollars, because I think no matter whether your income is at the very beginning of the career and you're making very little, or you're in those last few years before retirement, you're making the most you've ever made, the percentages shouldn't change. Now, the dollars will certainly change over time. But whether you're working part-time, even, you're a high schooler and you're working at the Chick-fil-A, that was me, still saving 10% not only helps start that fund and start that compounding interest, but more than that, what it does is psychological, and it builds the principal. So when you get a raise, your savings is automatically increasing because you're basing everything off of percentages. So I think that's a super helpful starting point. And again, when you're working at Chick-fil-A part-time, it might be $20 a month you're saving, but it's setting that groundwork that, hey, 10% of what I make is going towards the savings account no matter what. And then it gets a lot easier when you get that raise to not have that temptation to say, oh, well, I'm making $300 more per paycheck, so I'm going to go to the, I don't know why I was going to say Golden Corral. Don't go to Golden Corral when you get a raise. Yeah. I'm going to Cheesecake Factory, more often because I'm making more money. But really, if I get a $300 raise, okay, $30 of it is gone to savings. For me, $30 is gone to giving. And then from there, okay, now how do I allocate the margin?
Yeah. Everybody, and myself included, is susceptible to this. I've had to face this in my own life. My wife is in PA school right now, so I'm like, okay, well, we'll save a significant more when she's done with PA school and now working. But why can't I adjust my lifestyle now in order to compensate and be saving now? Because again, it's percentages. It's not necessarily the dollar amounts that you're putting aside. It's the percentages and creating the discipline. That's really the word that summarizes this series more than anything, is if we talk about what you need to develop to stay out of the money pit, it's discipline. Discipline is the word for that. When we go to our next series that we're going to start right after this, Allie, when we talk about money map, probably the word to describe that is intentionality. Intentionality with where the money goes. But for the money pit, to avoid those pitfalls, it is truly discipline. And you want to develop it as early as possible. And if you've never had that, now's the time to start. Now's the time to start building that. I know we haven't brought in a whole lot of content necessarily in this episode, but it's more of just a summarization of all the things that we've talked about over the last 4 or 5 episodes of you got to build this discipline. You got to start setting things aside, and you have to shift your mindset. It can't be, I'm going to start doing this when. It needs to be, I'm starting this now because I want to look different 5 years from now, or even 6 months from now, or even a month from now. I want to look different than what I was doing before. So again, Allie, why don't you summarize our DIY money steps that really cultivate in that discipline that you need to develop?
Yeah, so you can go back at the beginning of the year. We always do a back to the basics where we just go through the baby steps, they're very similar to Dave Ramsey's baby steps, but the DIY money steps. So first thing is the fast cash. You've got to have your $1,000 because when you start on this process and you start to be disciplined, things will happen. It never fails.
The inevitable 2x4.
Then you've got to get out of debt. So get a 6-month emergency fund, tackle debt, take care of what you need to now. And that's when you can start creating wealth. And so there's a lot of complexity in those different steps. There's a lot of different variations to them, but the overall steps don't change. And the last thing I'll add as we finish up our Money Pit episodes is don't get discouraged looking around you. I think sometimes, especially as a young person, I look at my own savings account and I'm like, I haven't saved anything. What's going on? But even those small steps make a huge difference because you don't need to be sprinting on the path to wealth your entire lifetime. You just need to be taking that next step in the right direction. So in the next series that we're going to start next episode, we're going to talk about the money map. So what are the steps? Where is the next right direction? Because if you stay on the right trail, and you don't stay from the path, then I truly believe anyone can become a millionaire. So we're going to be talking about that. Make sure you check that out.
Yep.
Keep your questions coming.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, when it comes to what we're talking about now, this money pit, you're going to fall into some of these things. You're going to try to keep up with the Joneses, and you're going to realize it later on. You're going to have trouble building that margin or wanting to really tackle those expenses. You're going to add a little bit more than you should. You're going to maybe fall into some of these different traps. You're going to say, I'll save later, or I'll pay off debt later. Some of those things are going to happen, but the difference between the people that do become wealthy and put themselves in a good spot and the people that don't kind of stay in the same area is that when you fall in those pits, you can bring yourself out of them, or you can bring your family out of them. So I think that's super, super important. Hey, friends, the secret to wealth is really very simple. Live on less than you make, invest the rest. Do so for a very long time. Make it a great one.